"Greetings, traveler. I'm glad to see you in my tavern. Here you may rest after a hard road, drink a mug of good ale, and listen to an old, honest witcher's tale, one that smells of smoke, winding roads, and silver coins." The wind over the Pontar smelled of iron and damp earth. Spring had come too soon that year, melting the snows before the soil was ready, and the paths through Temeria's borderlands had turned to gray rivers of mud. Geralt of Rivia rode along one such road, his cloak drawn tight and his hood low, Roach's hooves squelching in the muck. Mist drifted through the birch trees, curling like pale smoke. Somewhere distant a raven croaked, a rough, lonely sound that carried through the fog. Geralt had no destination that morning. The path had a way of deciding for him. Witchers were not welcome in towns unless someone needed them, and when that need arose, it was rarely for anything pleasant. Still, coin was coin, and contracts didn't find themselves. He stopped when he reached a fork in the road. One path led west toward Vizima and civilization. The other wound south through a thicket of pines toward the border with Sodden. A wooden post stood at the crossroads, leaning drunkenly under the weight of damp moss. Someone had nailed a notice to it, half torn by the wind. Geralt dismounted, ripped it free, and read the few legible lines. Help needed in Radden, livestock slain, disappearances in the wood, shadow seen by night, payment promised by Elderman Torben. Geralt folded the paper, tucking it into his belt. The name Radden stirred a vague memory, a hamlet somewhere near the old sodden fields, no more than a cluster of huts and a tavern with flat ale. But the promise of coin was enough. He turned Roach toward the southern road. By midday the clouds had thickened and rain began to fall. Thin, steady, relentless. The path narrowed into a tunnel of trees, and the mist grew heavier, clinging low to the ground. Geralt could smell the rot of wet leaves and the faint copper scent of something else. Blood, old and stale. When the village finally appeared, it did so like a mirage. Gray roofs crouched under sagging thatch, smoke rising weakly from one chimney. The people stared as Geralt rode in, whispering behind half-closed shutters. Children were pulled indoors by nervous mothers. The Witcher was used to it. He tied Roach before the tavern, pushed open the creaking door, and stepped into the sour warmth of the common room. The smell of ale, sweat, and smoke hit him. A handful of men sat around the hearth, their eyes darting toward him with the wary curiosity one reserves for dangerous beasts. The barkeep, a burly man with a crooked nose, wiped his hands on a rag and gave a cautious nod. "Looking for a meal or for trouble?" the man asked. "Neither," Geralt replied. "I'm looking for Elder Torben." A silence followed. One of the older men by the fire muttered, "Told ye he'd come, the Witcher." Torben turned out to be a thin, gray-bearded villager with sunken cheeks and a voice that quavered even when he tried to sound firm. He led Geralt to a table by the wall and ordered 2 mugs of ale. "You came quick," he said, nervously twisting his cap in his hands. "Didn't expect no one would take the job." "I was passing through," Geralt said. "Tell me what happened." Torben hesitated, glancing toward the men by the hearth, before lowering his voice. "It started 3 weeks past. Cows, goats, torn apart in the fields. Then people went missing. A boy first, Jakob, the miller's lad, then Marta, the widow. We found what was left of her by the brook. Not much, though. Blood, bones. Looked like something sucked her dry. Geralt frowned. "When did you last see this creature?" "Night before last," Torben whispered. "A shadow, taller than a man, thin like a branch in the wind. It screamed when the moon rose, a sound like a woman wailing. No one dares go into the woods now." The Witcher leaned back, silent. The description could fit several beasts, a noon wraith, a grave hag, even a fledgling vampire, but none quite matched. He'd need to see the bodies. "Take me to where you found the last one," he said. Torben paled. "Now?" "Now." They left the tavern as the rain eased into a misting drizzle. The villagers watched them go, crossing themselves as Geralt passed. The path out of Radden led north toward a narrow stream cutting through the birchwood. The trunks glimmered white in the dim light, and the air hung thick and heavy. Torben stopped near a cluster of stones by the water's edge. "Here," he whispered. "This is where we found her." Geralt crouched, eyes scanning the ground. The soil was soft, muddied, but beneath the surface lay marks, deep grooves like claw prints, each with too many fingers. The air carried that same copper tang. He brushed the wet earth aside and found a fragment of bone, small and porous, gnawed at one end. He lifted it, turning it over in his gloved hand. "Human," he said quietly. Torben shuddered. "You'll take care of it, won't you, Witcher?" "I'll find out what it is first." He straightened and studied the woods. A chill rippled through the trees, the mist twisting as though stirred by unseen breath. Somewhere deeper in the forest, something moved. Slow, deliberate, just beyond sight. Geralt reached for the hilt of his silver sword. "Go back to the village," he told Torben. "Lock your doors and keep everyone inside after dark." The elderman didn't argue. He turned and fled down the path, his boots slapping through the mud. Geralt watched him disappear, then drew his sword. The steel whispered free of its scabbard, gleaming faintly in the dim light. The forest waited. The Witcher stepped forward deeper into the mist. Behind him the sound of the brook faded, swallowed by the hush of the trees. The air grew colder and the fog thickened until it muffled even the sound of his own footsteps. Then somewhere ahead came a soft sound like weeping. A woman's voice, distant, trembling. Geralt froze. He knew that voice, not the person, but the kind. The lure of something that wore grief like a mask. He muttered an old word, a Witcher sign flaring faint blue on his palm, and the mist stirred at his command. The weeping stopped. Something was watching him now, something waiting. The woods of Radden held their breath. Mist clung to the undergrowth like a living thing, curling around roots and branches, veiling all beyond a few paces. Geralt moved with the practiced silence of a predator, each step deliberate, each sound measured. His medallion trembled faintly against his chest. Something nearby pulsed with magic. The Witcher knelt beside a fallen log, fingers brushing over faint traces in the mud. The prints were human, bare feet, light but hurried, moving erratically through the forest. Here and there the trail deepened where someone had stumbled, hands pressed to the earth, and once, there, a streak of blood. He followed. The path wound downward into a hollow where the mist was thickest. The smell of rot grew stronger, old decay mixed with something chemical, sharp as burnt herbs. Geralt recognized the scent, alchemical residue. Someone had been experimenting here, and not with care. The hollow ended in a clearing. A ruin stood there, crumbling stone half swallowed by vines. What had once been an elven watchtower now sagged under centuries of neglect, its narrow windows staring blind into the fog. Geralt approached cautiously. Inside, the shadows shifted with his movement. The floor was littered with shards of glass and broken flasks. A work table had collapsed under the weight of rusted instruments, and along one wall someone had scratched runes into the stone. Clumsy, hurried work, human, not elven. Geralt touched the marks, feeling the residual tingle of enchantment. Binding spell, he muttered, old and unstable. The medallion pulsed again. Behind him something scraped. He turned swiftly, sword raised. A shape moved in the far corner, slender, hunched, pale. For an instant it seemed human. A woman with long hair and torn garments clinging to her form. But then she lifted her head, and the illusion broke. Her face was a mask of bone and sinew, eyes glowing faintly violet in the dim light. The creature hissed, its voice still tinged with that same mournful wail that had haunted the woods. Geralt's hand twitched toward a moon dust bomb, but he hesitated. There was something wrong about the creature's stance. Not feral, but uncertain, trembling as though trapped between fear and pain. He took a slow step forward. "Easy," he said softly. "I'm not here to harm you." The creature flinched, retreating deeper into the shadows. "Can you understand me?" he asked. A flicker in its expression, recognition. The lips moved soundlessly, then it whispered, hoarse and raw, "Help me." Geralt's grip on his sword tightened. That was no mimicry. The voice was human, the plea genuine. "Who did this to you?" Before the creature could answer, a sudden light flared at the far end of the ruin. A sphere of blue fire burst against the wall, blinding bright. Geralt leapt aside as the blast scorched the air. A figure emerged from the smoke, a man in a black cloak, his face half hidden by a hood, eyes glittering with madness. "Step away from her," the man shouted, raising his staff. "You will not undo my work." Geralt straightened, keeping the creature behind him. "Your work?" he said coldly. "You made this?" "She is the first success," the man spat. "A fusion of flesh and essence, something beyond human, beyond witcher. You have no right to interfere." Geralt's tone sharpened. "You've made a monster out of a woman." The mage sneered. "Monster? You of all people should know what that word means. You were made too, were you not? Mutated, broken, remade by your precious Kaer Morhen? Your kin." Geralt's eyes narrowed. "And yet I still know right from wrong." The mage raised his staff again. "You'll learn to keep your judgment to yourself." He unleashed another spell, a twisting bolt of lightning that struck where Geralt had stood an instant before. The Witcher rolled aside, drew a dimeridium bomb from his belt, and hurled it. The explosion shattered the air, with a metallic crack disrupting the magic around them. The mage's next spell fizzled harmlessly. Geralt closed the distance in a heartbeat. Steel met staff with a jarring clang. Sparks leapt between them as the mage gritted his teeth and whispered another incantation. The air shimmered. Geralt felt pressure behind his eyes, like invisible hands clawing at his mind. He snarled, drew on his training, and cast Ard. The force of the sign flung the mage backward into the crumbling wall. Stone cracked. The man slumped, but did not fall. He coughed blood and laughed weakly. "You think you can stop it? The process is irreversible." Geralt advanced, sword tip glinting. "Tell me what you did to her." "Used the mutagenic base from your kind," the mage rasped. "A mixture of alchemy and necromancy. I sought to create something new, something that could survive the chaos to come." Geralt's expression hardened. You've created suffering, not salvation. The mage smiled through blood. You can't kill me. Without me, she dies. The creature, still cowering in the shadows, let out a low, mournful sound. Geralt turned, torn between rage and pity. Her violet eyes met his, pleading, lucid for a moment. He made his choice. In one swift motion, Geralt reversed his grip and struck, not to kill, but to break the mage's staff. The weapon splintered, its crystal core shattering in a burst of blue light. The mage screamed as the backlash of his own magic consumed him. When the light faded, he lay still. The ruin was silent once more. Geralt sheathed his sword slowly, stepping toward the trembling creature. Her body flickered between solid and spectral, as though her essence were unraveling now that the mage was gone. Please, she whispered again. End it. Geralt hesitated. There was no saving her, not with alchemy, not with potions, not with any art he knew. Her pulse was faint, her body a patchwork of life and death. The kindest mercy left was steel. He drew his silver sword. Forgive me. Her eyes softened. Thank you. The blade moved swift and clean. The creature's form dissolved into mist, then into nothing. Only silence remained. Geralt stood for a long moment in the ruins, the weight of the act heavy in his chest. Then he turned toward the doorway. Outside, dawn's gray light was breaking through the clouds. He left the ruin behind, heading back toward Radden. The villagers would ask if the monster was slain, and he would tell them yes. That much, at least, was true. But as he walked through the thinning mist, he couldn't shake the thought of the mage's words or the faint echo of the creature's voice in his mind. Beyond Witcher, beyond human, somewhere perhaps. Others were trying to do the same, to play with mutagens and souls, to build new weapons from old tragedies. And that was a thought darker than any night in Radden's woods. Geralt mounted Roach at the edge of the village, glancing once over his shoulder. The mist was lifting, the forest quiet again. Life would return to the fields, the people would forget, but the path never forgets. He set his spurs and rode on, the road stretching before him through the waking light. Another dawn, another burden, another secret to carry through the gloom. By the time Geralt left the mists of Radden behind, the morning sun had climbed above the tree line, though it offered little warmth. A chill wind swept through the open fields, bending the tall grasses in waves. He followed the narrow track that led east toward the main trade road. The village lay silent behind him, its people content in their ignorance that the danger was ended. But Geralt's mind was far from content. He had seen many monstrosities born of alchemy, many twisted forms born of reckless ambition, yet this one lingered in his thoughts. The mage's words echoed still, beyond Witcher, beyond human. Such talk rarely ended with one man's folly. Someone had supplied that alchemist with resources or knowledge long forbidden. Roach snorted, sensing his unease. Geralt patted her neck absently. Easy, girl, he murmured. We've seen worse. The road turned toward a ridge where the remains of an old watchtower stood. Its stones were blackened by age and lightning. A good place for rest and a clearer view of what lay ahead. Geralt dismounted, scanned the horizon, and knelt to inspect the ground. The soil bore fresh tracks, hooves and wagon wheels heading south. Traders, perhaps, or witch hunters. A faint trail of smoke rose in the distance. Not a village, a campfire. He followed it. As he approached, he caught voices, 3 of them, men by the sound speaking in low tones. He stopped short of the clearing and listened. "Told you, Marcus. The mage fled this way," one voice said. "If we find any trace, the captain will double our pay." "Double our graves, more like," another grumbled. "You saw what he did to the hunters near Dooney's Bridge. I say we go back to Oxenford and tell them we found nothing." The third man snorted. "Coward. We're not turning back. Witch hunters don't quit. If he's alive, we burn him. If he's dead, we burn whatever's left." Witch hunters, indeed. Geralt sighed inwardly. Trouble bred trouble. He stepped out from the brush. "If it's a mage you're after," he said, "you're too late." The men spun around startled, hands flying to their weapons. The one called Marcus squinted at him. "A witcher," he said, spitting to the side. "Figures." Geralt remained still, arms folded. "He's dead? His work destroyed. Best turn back before you find something worse." The leader scowled. "We'll see about that. Where's the body?" "In the ruins north of Radden. You'll find what's left of him among the stones. I wouldn't linger there." The second hunter stepped forward, his eyes darting nervously. "You mean the rumors were true then? That he was making things?" Geralt's voice was calm. "He was trying to build what he didn't understand. The forest took care of the rest." Marcus hesitated, then gave a short nod. "We'll verify it ourselves. If you speak true, you've done us a service." His tone held no gratitude, only caution. "Still, we'll report your involvement to the Order." "Do as you like," Geralt said. "I don't answer to them." He left them then, striding back toward Roach. Behind him, their whispers resumed, uneasy and low. He had no desire to become entangled in their zealotry. Witch hunters saw little difference between a sorcerer and a mutant. The sun was already sinking when he reached the main road. A stone bridge crossed a sluggish stream there, and beside it stood an old shrine to Melitle, half toppled but still watched over by garlands of wildflowers. Geralt dismounted, leading Roach to the water. She drank while he crouched by the shrine, studying the offerings: bread, a lock of hair, a few copper coins. Superstition and faith both had their place. He left a coin of his own, murmuring under his breath, "For those who lost their peace." A soft rustle behind him made him turn. A figure stood by the trees, cloaked and hooded. "Strange to see a witcher make offerings," the figure said in a woman's voice, young, steady. "Stranger still to see someone sneaking up on one," Geralt replied. She pulled back her hood, revealing sharp features framed by auburn hair. Her eyes were green, bright as cut glass. "I didn't sneak. You were lost in thought." Geralt recognized the look of her clothes, a scholar's garb worn from travel. "You're far from Oxenford," he noted. "I was sent to find a man," she said. "A witcher, to be exact. Rumor said one passed this way." Geralt tilted his head. "Then you found him." She smiled faintly. "Geralt of Rivia. I hoped it was you." He frowned. "Who's asking?" "Alyssa Marin," she said. "Apprentice to Master Kira Metz." Geralt raised an eyebrow. "Kira's sending apprentices after me now?" "Not exactly," Alyssa replied. She received word of a rogue alchemist operating near the Temerian border. Said his work was tied to missing mutagenic formulas from the old Witcher keeps. When she heard of a creature slain in Radden, she guessed you'd be involved. Geralt's jaw tightened. Then she guessed right. Alyssa stepped closer. "Did he have anything on him? Notes, scrolls, mutagen vials?" "Nothing worth keeping," Geralt said. "Most of it was destroyed when the ruin collapsed." She sighed. "That's unfortunate. Kira believes others might be attempting similar experiments. Whoever this mage was, he wasn't working alone. Geralt's gaze drifted toward the darkening woods. I was afraid you'd say that. A cool breeze swept across the clearing. The first stars began to pierce the dusk. Geralt mounted Roach once more. Where are you heading? Alyssa asked. Where the trail leads, he said. You can follow if you've the stomach for it, but it won't be safe. I didn't travel this far to turn back, she answered. He nodded. Then keep up. They rode until night swallowed the road, the moon rising pale above the fields. The wind carried the smell of rain again, and the rustle of unseen wings overhead. Somewhere far behind them, the witch hunters reached the ruins of Radden and found only ashes. Somewhere farther still, word would spread that another witcher had meddled in forbidden magic. Geralt paid it no mind. The path stretched on, endless as ever, and the gloom deepened with each mile. He glanced once at his new companion, her face half hidden by the hood, but eyes alert, curious, unafraid. Kira's apprentices had never been timid ones. Perhaps that would serve them both in what lay ahead. Ahead the road forked again. One path toward the trade town of Ehrenwald, the other veering into the low marshlands where the air shimmered faintly green even in the dark. Geralt reined in Roach, studying the faint light. Swamp gases, Alyssa said, or something worse? Both, he murmured. He drew his sword slightly, the silver catching a ghostly glint from the moon. Stay close. The gloom thickens here. And with that, Witcher and Mage's apprentice pressed on into the mist once more, the world narrowing around them to the faint rhythm of hoofbeats and the slow, patient heartbeat of something waiting just beyond sight. The marshes beyond Ehrenwald were a place best left to fog and silence. Few dared to cross them, even by daylight, for the ground was treacherous and the air carried a rot that clung to skin and soul alike. The locals spoke of lights that drifted above the waters, pale, beckoning flames that lured wanderers to their deaths. Geralt had seen such things before. Not all were legends. Roach's hooves sank into the mire with each step, water sloshing about her fetlocks. The path, if it could be called one, wound between clumps of reeds and patches of dark, stagnant pools. Mist hovered low, ghostly white in the dimness. Alyssa rode beside him, her cloak drawn tight, though the damp had long seeped through. How far does this marsh stretch? She asked, her voice muffled by the fog. Farther than most maps show, Geralt replied. These lands were once fields, before the sodden floods. When the river changed its course, it drowned everything. What's left doesn't welcome travelers. She glanced around uneasily. Then why come this way? Because if our mage had allies, they'll hide where no one else dares to look. They rode on. The air thickened, carrying a fetid sweetness. Geralt's medallion trembled faintly. He halted Roach with a tug of the reins. Something's near, he murmured. A sound drifted through the fog, a faint splash. Then another, closer. The reeds rustled. Alyssa raised her hand, conjuring a small sphere of light that floated above her palm. It glowed pale and steady, pushing back the mist, just enough to reveal movement in the water. Figures emerged, 3, 4, then 5, shambling shapes, coated in muck. Drowners. Their eyes glimmered like fish scales in the glow. Geralt drew his silver sword with a hiss of steel. Stay behind me, the creatures hissed, drawn by the warmth of life, their movements jerky yet quick. The first lunged, its claws slashing at the air. Geralt met it with a clean arc of silver, cleaving through its skull. Black blood spattered the water. Another came from the side. He turned, swung low, and severed its legs in one stroke. Alyssa whispered a spell, sending a burst of heat that sizzled across the marsh. The stench of burning flesh rose. One of the drowners shrieked, its body collapsing in a steaming heap. "Good," Geralt said curtly, already turning to face the next. They fought as one, Witcher steel and sorceress flame, until the last creature sank beneath the water, leaving only ripples and the faint hiss of cooling metal. The marsh grew still once more. Alyssa wiped mud from her sleeve. "So these are drowners," she said, catching her breath. "Ugly things." "Ugly and common," Geralt replied, "but they don't gather without reason. Something drives them." He crouched beside one of the corpses, studying its bloated features. The gills were blackened, unnatural. "Tainted," he muttered, "mutagen residue." "Mutagen?" Alyssa stepped closer. "Like the mage in Radin used?" Geralt nodded grimly. "Not his work, though. Someone else is trying similar experiments. These drowners were dosed, strengthened, controlled." Alyssa frowned. "Controlled by what?" "That," Geralt said, standing, "is what we'll find out." They pressed deeper into the marsh. Hours passed, marked only by the rhythmic creak of leather and the distant croak of unseen frogs. The fog never lifted. Once or twice, Alyssa glimpsed faint lights drifting through the mist, small wavering flames that danced just beyond reach. "Will-o-wisps," she whispered. "Or worse," Geralt said. "Keep your eyes ahead." Eventually the ground began to rise and the air grew cooler. A hill emerged from the mist, crowned by the dark silhouette of ruins. A stone manor, long fallen to decay. Its walls were cracked and hollow, but faint light glimmered from within, a flicker that spoke of human presence. Geralt stopped at the edge of the clearing. "Someone's there." Alyssa dismounted. "If this is another mage, we'll know soon enough." They approached on foot, moving with quiet precision. The heavy doors of the manor hung askew, one half broken, the other barely clinging to its hinges. Geralt pushed it aside and stepped into the gloom. Inside, the stench of alchemy and decay filled the air. Old blood, herbs, and the sharp tang of acid. The main hall was scattered with equipment, glass flasks, retorts, half-filled jars of strange liquids. Candles burned low on every surface, their wax pooling like frozen tears. Alyssa's eyes widened. "This isn't a ruin, it's a laboratory." Geralt knelt beside a table cluttered with notes and vials. The handwriting was precise, methodical, unlike the scrawled madness of Radin's mage. "Whoever worked here knew what they were doing," he said. "This isn't the work of a lone alchemist, it's organized." He lifted one vial. The liquid inside shimmered faintly blue. "Witcher mutagen," he said quietly, "but refined." A voice spoke from the shadows. "I see you recognize craftsmanship when you behold it." Geralt turned sharply. A man stepped into the candlelight, tall, robed in dark velvet, his hair silvered with age, though his eyes gleamed sharp and cold. "Geralt of Rivia," he said with a faint smile. "I was expecting you." Alyssa tensed, her fingers twitching toward a spell. "Who are you?" The man inclined his head. "Master Elric, formerly of Ban Ard, scholar, researcher, and I suppose enemy of your kind, depending on how you judge me." Geralt's tone was level. "Depends on what you've done." "I've done what others fear to do," Elric said calmly. "I've taken the remnants of your dying order and improved upon them. No more trials by fire, no more dead children. A controlled process, a future for witchers, stronger, faster, immune to the chaos that destroyed the old world. Alyssa's voice hardened. By poisoning monsters and men alike? Elric spread his hands. Progress demands sacrifice. Surely your friend here understands that. Geralt's grip on his sword tightened. I understand murder when I see it. The old mage sighed. So predictable. You'd rather cling to your fading ways than embrace evolution. The world changes, Witcher. Even your kind must adapt, or perish. He raised a hand. Power thrummed through the air, bending light itself. Geralt lunged, but the floor erupted with a blinding flash. The explosion threw him backward, crashing through a table. Alyssa's spell met Elric's, sparks of energy scattering across the walls. When the smoke cleared, the mage was gone, his laughter echoing faintly through the corridors. Geralt rose slowly, grimacing. He teleported. Alyssa's light flickered. He took his notes. Geralt sheathed his sword. Then he's not finished. No, she said quietly, and now he knows. We're coming. Outside, the fog began to thicken again, curling through the broken windows like smoke. The marsh moaned with distant voices, the restless dead or something worse. Geralt looked toward the door. We'll rest here till dawn, then we track him. Alyssa nodded. And when we find him, Geralt's eyes glinted in the candlelight. Then we see if his new world can stand against an old one's steel. The candles sputtered as the night deepened, their flames trembling like the breath of the marsh itself. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled. The path ahead had darkened once more, and in its heart waited a man who sought to reshape the fate of witchers themselves. Geralt knew this would not end with one battle. It was the beginning of something larger, something that would draw blood from both man and monster before dawn ever truly returned. Dawn crept slowly over the marshlands, casting a dim and weary light through the broken windows of the manor. The candles had long since burned to stubs, leaving the hall in gray shadow. Geralt sat by the remains of the fire, sharpening his sword with steady strokes. Each rasp of steel on stone was measured, patient, a rhythm that kept his thoughts from wandering too far into memory. Alyssa had slept little. She sat across from him, her cloak drawn tight, poring over what scraps of parchment they had salvaged after the explosion. Most were half-burned, the ink smeared and faded, yet a few fragments remained legible. Subject 9. Increased stability and tissue regeneration. Secondary mutation causes heightened aggression. She read softly. This is detailed work, more advanced than what we saw in Radin. Geralt looked up briefly. He wasn't lying about his skill. Ban-Ard mages are meticulous, dangerous because they think themselves rational. Alyssa frowned. You think he's building an army? Not yet, but he's preparing one. Outside, the marsh groaned under the wind. The water rippled with sluggish movement, life stirring in the muck. Geralt's medallion gave a faint tremor. He sheathed his sword and stood. Something's coming. Alyssa rose at once, her hands already glowing with magic. Elric? No, Geralt said, listening. Not him. Something else. The first sound was a splash, then another. Heavy footsteps, slow but deliberate, moving through the water toward the manor. Geralt went to the doorway and peered through the mist. Shapes loomed at the edge of the clearing. Half a dozen, maybe more. They were large, their movements jerky and uneven, their skin glistening with damp rot. Not drowners this time, bigger. He recognized the gait of rot fiends. Get inside, he told Alyssa. Upstairs if you can, I'll hold them here. I can fight. Do as I say. She hesitated only a heartbeat before obeying, racing for the stairs. Geralt drew both blades, steel for the moment, silver ready for whatever else might come. The rot fiends broke from the mist with a gurgling roar. Their flesh hung in tatters, ribs and sinew gleaming through the muck. The stench rolled over him like a wave. Geralt moved to meet them. The first lunged. He sidestepped and drove his steel through its chest, twisting free before it exploded in a burst of burning bile. He ducked behind a pillar as the second charged, swinging wildly. Geralt answered with Igni, a burst of flame that engulfed the creature, the air filled with shrieks and the thick smoke of burning flesh. Above he heard Alyssa chanting. A surge of blue light crackled down from the balcony, striking two of the monsters square in the chest. They convulsed, limbs snapping like dry wood, and fell still. But more came. A dozen shapes rising from the swamp, drawn by the noise, by the scent of blood. Geralt switched to silver, the blade gleaming white in the dim light. He moved with purpose, swift, economical strikes, every motion honed by years of battle. A head rolled, another body fell, twitching into the mud. The Witcher's face remained expressionless, his eyes calm even in the chaos. Alyssa's magic faltered once, her energy draining fast. "They keep coming," she cried. "Then we end it," Geralt shouted back. He pulled a bomb from his belt, a dragon's dream, and hurled it into the midst of the advancing horde. A flash, a roar, and fire blossomed across the marsh. The shockwave flattened reeds and sent burning fragments spinning through the fog. For a moment, the world was nothing but heat and flame. When the smoke cleared, silence returned. The monsters lay scattered, blackened and still. Geralt lowered his sword, breathing steady, though his muscles ached. The manor's entrance was scorched, the air thick with smoke. Alyssa descended the stairs, pale but unhurt. "That," she said quietly, "was impressive." Geralt wiped the blade clean. Messy, more like. She glanced toward the marsh, where the flames still licked at the water. "He sent them, didn't he, Elric?" "He set the bait," Geralt said. "Those creatures weren't random. He wanted to see what we'd do." Alyssa's brow furrowed. "You think he's watching us? Testing us?" Geralt replied. "Same as his experiments. He's studying reaction, endurance, decision, trying to understand the line between man and monster." The thought lingered between them. By midday, they buried what remained of the bodies beneath the black soil at the marsh's edge. The ground hissed where the blood soaked in. Then they packed what they could carry, supplies, notes, a few unbroken vials, and left the manor behind. The trail led east, through tangled woods where the trees grew tall and twisted, their roots breaking through the earth like the bones of giants. The path was faint, used rarely if ever, but Geralt found signs, a boot print, a snapped branch, a faint smell of magic. Elric had passed this way. As they walked, Alyssa broke the silence. "You said his kind were dangerous because they believed themselves rational. What did you mean?" Geralt's eyes stayed on the ground. "Madmen act from passion. You can predict them. But those who claim logic for their cruelty, they believe they're saving the world. That makes them impossible to reason with." "And you?" she asked softly. "Do you believe witchers save the world?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "No, we keep it breathing long enough for others to ruin it properly." That ended the talk. By evening, the trees thinned, opening to a rocky ravine. At its heart stood another ruin, smaller than the manor but with walls still intact. A tower rose from the far end, its top broken, yet light flickered faintly through narrow slits. Geralt's medallion buzzed again, stronger this time. He's there. They crept closer, moving from stone to stone. A low hum filled the air. The sound of power gathered, of rituals in motion. From within the tower came the murmured cadence of a spell, rhythmic and low. Geralt motioned for silence. He approached the door and pressed his ear to the cold wood. The voice inside was clear now, Elric's, chanting in a language older than the conjunction. Alyssa's eyes widened. "That's an invocation to open a rift," she whispered. "He's trying to draw on another realm's essence." Geralt's hand went to the hilt of his sword. "Then we stop him before he finishes." He pushed the door open and stepped into the chamber. The sight froze him where he stood. At the center of the room, carved into the stone floor, burned a vast sigil, glowing with crimson light. Within it floated a shape, human or nearly so, suspended in shimmering liquid. Tubes ran from its limbs into glass vessels filled with swirling color. Its face was pale, expressionless, its eyes closed. Elric stood beside it, hands raised, power coursing between his fingers. "Ah," he said without turning, "my expected guests." Geralt raised his sword. "End this, Elric." The mage smiled faintly. "Too late. The age of witchers is ending, Geralt, but their legacy will endure, perfected, purified. This one will be the first of the new order." The figure in the sigil stirred, its eyes fluttering open. For a moment, Geralt saw a face there, not monstrous, but eerily familiar. A witcher's eyes. "Kaer Morhen's line," Elric murmured proudly. "Reborn." Geralt's voice was low. "You've no right." "Right?" Elric's tone rose, filled with manic fervor. "You abandoned progress. I am giving your kind a future." The air trembled with the force of his magic. Alyssa raised her hands, weaving a counterspell. The sigil flared brighter, the energy straining, pulsing like a living heart. "Geralt!" she shouted. "If that ritual completes—" "I know." He rushed forward as the floor cracked beneath his boots, shards of red light slicing through the air. Elric turned, his face contorted, and unleashed a wave of power that struck like a hammer. Geralt flew back, hit the wall, and rolled to his feet. His medallion was vibrating violently. The figure within the sigil screamed. It was a terrible sound, half human, half something else. And the chamber shook as the runes splintered. The creature's body twisted, veins burning with unnatural light. Elric shouted a final incantation, but the spell turned on him. The explosion that followed tore through the tower like a storm. When the dust settled, the runes were gone, the sigil burned out. The creature lay motionless in the wreckage, smoke rising from its skin. Elric was nowhere to be seen. Alyssa coughed, pushing herself upright. "Is it over?" Geralt sheathed his sword slowly. "For now?" But as he looked down at the creature, he saw its fingers twitch. Its eyes opened again, yellow, slitted. Witcher's eyes. And Geralt understood that the true battle had only just begun. The creature's eyes glowed in the half-light, molten gold ringed with black, so like Geralt's own that for an instant the Witcher felt his heart falter. Steam rose from its skin, the last breath of dying alchemy, yet life pulsed beneath the ash. The chamber was silent save for the slow, rasping draw of its first breaths. Alyssa stood beside him, her voice trembling with awe. "It lives." Geralt's hand went to his sword. "It shouldn't." The figure stirred, its muscles flexed like cords drawn too tight. When it spoke, its voice was raw and cracked. the echo of something once human. Where am I? Still here, Geralt said, still alive for now. The creature turned its head toward him. Its face was smooth, unscarred, strangely young, though the veins beneath its skin shimmered faintly with light. Who are you? Geralt of Rivia, he answered. Witcher. Like you were meant to be. The words seemed to catch in the creature's throat. Witcher? Of a sort, Geralt said. Elric's design. You were his experiment. The creature looked down at its hands, flexing them slowly. He hurt me. He said I would be strong. Alyssa took a careful step forward. You remember him? Yes. The voice grew steadier now, the tone almost childlike. He said I would make the world safe. He said I would not feel pain. Geralt's jaw tightened. And do you? The creature hesitated. I do now. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The tower groaned as the wind tore through the broken windows, scattering ashes and shards of glass. Geralt crouched beside the creature, studying it. The eyes, the voice, even the way it breathed, all mirrored human life too closely, but beneath that veneer his medallion still trembled. There was magic bound deep within its flesh. What's your name? Alyssa asked gently. The creature blinked. He called me Subject 13. Geralt frowned. We'll find you a better one later. He rose. Can you stand? 13 nodded uncertainly. Geralt helped him to his feet. The creature's movements were unsteady, untested, like a newborn struggling to find balance. But already there was strength in the way he held himself, an unnatural resilience. We can't leave him here, Alyssa said. Elric might return. Elric's gone, Geralt replied. But his work won't end with him. Others will come looking. He turned toward the doorway. We take him to Ehrenwald. There's a healer there who owes me a favor. Maybe she can help us keep him alive. Alyssa nodded, though her gaze lingered on 13. Alive, yes. But at what cost? They left the ruins behind as the storm broke in earnest. Rain lashed against stone, filling the ravine with the roar of falling water. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the marsh like silver fire. By the time they reached higher ground, night had fallen again. The world smelled of wet earth and smoke, and the faint lights of distant villages flickered like dying embers across the horizon. 13 walked between them, silent save for his measured breathing. Each step seemed to come easier than the last. When he stumbled once, Geralt caught his arm. Steady, the Witcher said. 13 looked up at him, and for a heartbeat something flickered in his expression. A strange mix of gratitude and confusion. Why do you help me? Geralt hesitated. The rain beat softly against his hood. Because you didn't choose what was done to you. The creature said nothing, but the answer seemed to ease him. They made camp beneath an old willow by the edge of the road. The fire hissed in the damp air, casting long, dancing shadows. Alyssa brewed a thin stew while Geralt sat cleaning his weapons. 13 crouched nearby, studying the flames with an almost childlike fascination. Does it hurt? He asked suddenly, pointing to Geralt's medallion. No, Geralt said. It warns me of danger. It moves when I come close. Geralt's eyes narrowed slightly. I noticed. Alyssa looked up from her pot. His aura is unlike anything I've felt. It's alive, but unstable. Geralt set his whetstone down. Meaning? Meaning if that magic turns inward, it could destroy him, or everything around him. The fire crackled between them. 13 looked from one face to the other, reading their silence. I don't want to hurt anyone, he said softly. I don't even know what I am. Geralt met his gaze. Then we'll find out together. But first, you eat. For a time, the only sounds were rain and the low murmur of the fire. Yet beyond the circle of warmth, the night stirred. Shapes moved between the trees, unseen but not unfelt. Geralt's hand went to his sword before the whisper reached his ear. Rivia's butcher, a voice called from the dark. Playing guardian to abominations now? Geralt rose at once, silver blade half drawn. 5 figures emerged from the shadows, witch hunters, torches guttering in the rain. Marcus led them, the same man he'd seen days ago in the marsh. His eyes gleamed with fanatic light. I told you, Marcus said. He was meddling with forbidden arts. Look at what he shelters. Alyssa stood, magic gathering around her like heat. Leave while you can. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Marcus laughed harshly. Oh, I understand. That thing beside you is proof enough. The mage's spawn. We'll burn it and the both of you with it. 13's breathing quickened. Geralt. Stay behind me, the Witcher said, calm but low. The hunters advanced. One raised a crossbow, its bolt tipped with silver. Geralt moved first. His sword flashed, deflecting the shot, then cut through the first man's guard with brutal precision. The camp exploded into chaos. Shouts, sparks, the hiss of Alyssa's spells striking against steel. 13 froze as 2 hunters lunged toward him. Instinct, not thought, moved him. He thrust out his hand and the air shattered. A surge of energy rippled outward, invisible yet crushing. The men flew backward, their bodies crumpling against the trees. When silence returned, only the storm remained. The hunters lay strewn about the clearing, lifeless. Alyssa lowered her hands slowly. Dear gods. 13 stared at his palms, trembling. I didn't mean to. Geralt sheathed his sword. I know. He looked down at the fallen men, but now we've got more enemies than we had before. He turned toward the road. Pack what you can. We leave before dawn. Alyssa obeyed, though her hand shook. 13 followed wordlessly, his expression hollow, lost. As they walked through the fading rain, the first light of morning crept across the world, gray and cold. Smoke rose in the distance, the kind that came from burning wood and burning flesh. The witch hunters' companions were already lighting their pyres somewhere beyond sight. Geralt said nothing. He simply led them onward, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The path had grown darker than ever, but the Witcher had walked darker still. Behind him, 13's voice broke the silence. Am I a monster? Geralt didn't turn. Not yet, he said, but the world will decide soon enough. The rain stopped. The wind shifted east, carrying the faint scent of smoke and war. Somewhere beyond the marshes, beyond even Temeria's borders, new storms were gathering. Storms not born of nature, but of men who thought themselves gods. Geralt pulled his cloak tighter and kept walking. The gloom was not yet done with him. The road wound eastward through rolling meadows turned to mud by spring rain, the morning sky the color of pewter. Mist trailed low across the fields, curling through the stalks like restless ghosts. Geralt rode at the front, his shoulders hunched against the chill. Behind him, Alyssa and 13 followed in silence. The horses' hooves beat a steady rhythm, muffled by damp earth. The night's violence still hung over them. The witch hunters' bodies had been left behind, consumed by the marsh's hunger. Geralt had no taste for burials when the living were yet in danger. The path permitted few luxuries of conscience. 13 rode bareback, balanced with unnatural ease. The creature's eyes flickered constantly, scanning the world with wary fascination. He watched the clouds, the flight of birds, even the glistening worms in the wheel ruts. Once he asked what the sun was made of. Geralt answered simply, "Fire and distance." The creature nodded, though his expression remained puzzled, as if the words held some meaning he could almost grasp. By midday they reached the outskirts of Ehrenwald, a modest trading town crouched at the edge of the forest. Its palisade leaned precariously, the wood green with rot. Smoke drifted from chimneys, and the faint clang of a blacksmith's hammer carried on the wind. Geralt reined in roach at the gate, where two guards stood blinking sleepily under the drizzle. The older of the pair straightened when he saw the medallion around Geralt's neck. "Witcher," he muttered, uncertain whether to be relieved or afraid. Geralt nodded. "We need shelter and a healer. I'll pay." The man glanced past him to 13 and frowned. "Your friend's not looking too well." "He's sick," Geralt said flatly. "Best you don't ask what kind." The guard hesitated, then shrugged. "Go on then. The inn's at the square, and old Matra keeps a hut by the well. She's the best we've got." Inside the town, the streets were narrow and half-flooded. Chickens pecked between puddles, and the smell of smoke mingled with wet hay. The inn, a squat timber building with a sagging roof, was nearly empty when they entered. The innkeep, a woman with a bandaged arm, wiped the counter with a cloth that had seen better days. "No trouble," she said before Geralt could speak. "Last witcher that came through left me with holes in the wall and a bill unpaid." "I'll pay in advance," Geralt replied, setting a pouch of coin on the counter. The woman's eyes brightened. "Then you're most welcome. Rooms upstairs. Meals if you've the stomach for stew." Alyssa managed a weary smile. "Stew will do." While she saw to the food, Geralt left to find Matra. The healer's hut stood crooked beside the town well, its walls hung with drying herbs. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of sage and smoke. The old woman looked up from her mortar as he entered, her eyes sharp despite her years. "You've brought trouble with you," she said without greeting. Geralt raised a brow. "You always greet strangers like that?" "Only the ones who smell of blood and magic." He said nothing to deny it. "I need you to look at someone. He's not human, but he's alive. For now." Matra's gaze narrowed. "What kind of not human?" "The kind made, not born," she grunted. "Then the gods won't help him. But I'll see what I can do." When they returned to the inn, 13 sat near the hearth, staring into the flames as if they spoke to him. Alyssa stood nearby, her hands clasped behind her back, worry plain in her eyes. "Come," Geralt said, "the healer will see you." 13 followed obediently, though his steps were slower than before. Matra examined him in silence, her fingers tracing the veins that pulsed faintly with inner light. When she finished, she shook her head. "He's dying," she said simply. Alyssa stiffened. "You're certain?" "His heartbeat's true, but his blood isn't blood. It's alchemical residue, unstable. Whatever keeps him alive is tearing him apart." 13 looked at her with quiet understanding. "It hurts sometimes," he murmured, "like my body doesn't belong to me." Geralt folded his arms. "Can you slow it down?" "Perhaps," Matra said, "but it'll cost you. The herbs alone." Geralt tossed her another pouch of coin. "Do what you can." The old woman nodded and set to work. She brewed a thick potion that filled the room with bitter fumes, then handed it to 13. "Drink slowly." If you survive the night, I'll make more. He drank without hesitation. The liquid glowed faintly as it slid down his throat, and he shuddered. For a moment, his eyes flared with golden light, then dimmed again. Alyssa turned to Geralt. This won't hold forever. I know, he said, but it buys us time. They spent the night in silence. Outside, rain fell without end, drumming softly on the roof. Geralt sat awake long after the others had slept, his sword across his knees. Thoughts circled like vultures, of Elric, of Kaer Morhen's ruins, of what it meant for Witchers to have a future born of blood and deceit. Before dawn, a scream shattered the quiet. Geralt was on his feet. In an instant, sword drawn. It came from Matra's hut. He burst through the door to find the old healer slumped against the wall, her eyes glassy, her mouth open in silent terror. The window was shattered, rain blowing in through the gap. 13 was gone. Alyssa appeared behind him, breathless. What happened? He's gone, Geralt said grimly, and something came for him. He knelt beside Matra's body. Her chest bore no wound, yet her skin was ashen, drained of color. Her veins stood black beneath the surface. Whatever had taken 13 had left its mark. Alyssa's voice was small. Elric? Geralt shook his head. No, this is older, darker. They followed the trail through the town, past the gates and into the woods beyond. The rain had eased, but fog clung to the ground, swallowing sound. Broken branches marked 13's passage. He had fled in haste or been driven. When they found him, he was kneeling beside a stream, his reflection trembling on the water's surface. His body shook and his hands were slick with black ichor. 13, Geralt called softly. The creature turned. His eyes burned gold, but his face was twisted with anguish. I didn't mean to hurt her, he said. Something inside me woke. I couldn't stop it. Geralt lowered his sword. We'll find a way to control it, but you have to come back. 13's gaze flickered toward the forest behind him. No, there's something out there calling me. I can feel it. Alyssa stepped closer. That's Elric's influence. He's trying to control you again. 13's voice was little more than a whisper. Maybe, but part of me wants to answer. The ground trembled faintly. Geralt felt it before he saw it, a surge of power pulsing through the air, like the echo of thunder beneath the earth. The trees bent as wind rushed through the clearing, carrying whispers in no human tongue. Alyssa's eyes widened. That's no spell. It's a summoning. Geralt's medallion quivered violently. He's not the only one Elric made, he said. From the fog came movement, 4 figures, pale and silent, their eyes glowing the same gold as 13's. They moved with eerie coordination, weapons drawn, faces blank as masks. 13's breath caught. They're like me. Geralt raised his sword. No, they're worse. The creatures fanned out, circling. Their movements were precise, almost graceful, like puppets bound by invisible strings. Geralt shifted his stance, preparing to strike. Stay behind me, he said. But 13 stepped forward instead, his voice breaking. No, let me try. He raised his hands. The air thickened, pulsing with that strange inner glow. For a heartbeat, the advancing creatures hesitated, as though recognizing him. Then, without warning, they turned their weapons not on Geralt, but on each other. The clearing erupted into chaos. Steel clashed, flesh tore. 13 screamed, clutching his head as though the battle raged within him as well. The last of the creatures fell, their bodies convulsing before going still. When it was over, 13 collapsed to his knees, trembling. Alyssa ran to him, but Geralt caught her arm. "Don't," he said quietly. "Not yet." The creature looked up, tears mixing with rain. "I killed them. They were my brothers." Geralt sheathed his sword slowly. "No, lad. They were Elric's ghosts, and if we don't stop him soon, he'll make more." 13 bowed his head, his voice barely a whisper. "Then show me how to end him." The wind carried away the words, but Geralt heard enough. He saw in the boy's eyes not just power, but a choice forming, fragile as dawn light. "Then we start by following his trail," Geralt said, "and we don't stop until it's cold." The rain ceased at last. Mist coiled through the trees like smoke, and in its heart walked a witcher, a sorceress, and the creature born between them, bound together now by the same grim purpose. The path stretched ahead, darker and longer than before, yet the faint promise of reckoning glimmered at its end. The forest beyond Ehrenwald thickened into ancient wilderness, where the trees grew tall enough to swallow the sun, and the air hung heavy with damp earth and moss. Birds did not sing here. The silence was near total, save for the whisper of branches and the faint crunch of boots against leaves. Geralt led the way, his medallion trembling at intervals, warning of faint traces of magic that clung to the soil like the scent of blood. Behind him walked Alyssa, her cloak drawn close, and 13, still pale from the night before. His movements were slower now, weighed down not only by exhaustion, but by what he had done. Every few steps, his hand drifted unconsciously toward his chest, as if something beneath the skin still stirred. They followed the remnants of Elric's trail, burnt soil, disturbed roots, and once the charred remains of a deer that had wandered too close to his power. The mage's passage was marked by decay, as if his very presence unraveled the life around him. "Whatever he's doing," Alyssa said softly, "it's accelerating. The farther we go, the stronger the residue feels. He's drawing power from something ancient." Geralt nodded. "The runes in his tower, those were elven. He's tapping into their ruins, their old channels of energy. Most of them lead east toward the Pontar Valley." "The elven catacombs?" she asked. "Perhaps," Geralt replied. "If he's mad enough to tamper with their relics, then the damage could spread far beyond him." 13 said nothing, but the word mad lingered on his lips. It was a word he had come to fear, one spoken too often about the thing he was becoming. By late afternoon, they reached the edge of a ravine. A river cut through the rocks below, its water running red with silt from the storms. Across the span, a single wooden bridge clung to the cliffs, its planks warped and slick with moss. Beyond it rose the dark outline of ruins, a once grand keep, now broken and hollow. Geralt studied it in silence. "That's where he's gone." "How do you know?" Alyssa asked. "Because that's where I'd go," he said. "High ground, shelter, isolation. Perfect place for a last stand." The wind shifted, carrying a faint sound across the gap. A low, rhythmic hum. Chanting. "Ritual," Alyssa murmured. "He's preparing something." Geralt turned to 13. "You stay with her. If things go wrong, you run." The creature shook his head. "No, this is mine too. He made me." Geralt met his gaze. For a moment, neither spoke. Then the Witcher gave a single nod. "Stay close, then." They crossed the bridge carefully. The boards creaked beneath their weight, but held. The closer they came to the ruins, the stronger the air vibrated, Power bled from the stones, thick and oppressive. The ruins were vast, arches shattered by time, walls carved with faded elven script. In the center stood a spire, leaning but unbroken, and from within it poured light, red, steady, and alive. They crept to the doorway and peered inside. Elric stood at the heart of the chamber, surrounded by a circle of runes carved into the stone. Around him floated crystal spheres filled with swirling color, red, blue, gold, the remnants of mutagenic brews. The air shimmered as he chanted, his voice low but resonant. On the floor beside him lay something covered by cloth, human-shaped. Geralt's hand tightened around his sword hilt. "He's making another one." Elric's voice rose. "From the failures of flesh comes the perfection of will. From death, rebirth." Alyssa stepped forward, readying a spell, but Geralt stopped her with a hand. "No magic yet. He's channeling through the room itself. Disturb it and it'll collapse on us." He reached for a bomb at his belt, dimeridium cold and dull in his palm, and hurled it into the circle. The explosion rang like struck iron. Sparks burst through the chamber. Elric's chant faltered. "Geralt!" The mage snarled, spinning around. His eyes gleamed with wild light. "You persist, like a wound that refuses to close." Geralt advanced, blade raised. "You should have learned to stop cutting." Elric lifted his hands, and the air between them twisted. Lightning speared outward, striking the Witcher square in the chest. Geralt staggered but kept his feet, the medallion burning hot against his skin. He rolled aside, dodging a second blast, and came up inside the mage's guard. Steel met staff in a ringing clash. Alyssa cried out a word, and the air rippled as she cast a barrier between them and the swirling mutagenic orbs. The ground shook underfoot. 13 stood frozen at the doorway, torn between fear and something deeper, a pull that came from the ritual circle itself. He felt it calling, whispering in the same voice that had haunted his dreams. "Come home, child of chaos, come and be whole." "No," he whispered, but the power surged through him anyway. His veins glowed, his pulse quickened, and suddenly the energy around Elric bent toward him instead of away. The mage faltered, eyes widening. "Impossible," he hissed. "You were incomplete, broken." 13 stepped forward, his own voice low but resonant. "Maybe, but I am not yours anymore." The air between them shattered. Power erupted outward, blinding white, tearing the sigil apart. Geralt shielded his eyes as the chamber exploded in light and sound. When the glare faded, Elric lay sprawled against the far wall, his robes smoking, his staff shattered. The ritual circle was gone, burned into ash. 13 stood at its center, his chest heaving, the light beneath his skin dimming slowly. Geralt approached cautiously. "You alive?" 13 looked up, his expression distant. "I stopped him, but I felt what he was doing. He wasn't just making soldiers, he was opening a path." "A path?" Alyssa asked. "To something beyond this world," 13 said. "Something he called the Source. He said it would cleanse the continent of weakness." Geralt's frown deepened. Elric wasn't the first to chase power through other worlds, but few live long enough to speak of what they find. Alyssa knelt beside the mage's body. "He's still breathing?" "Not for long," Geralt said. Elric's eyes flickered open, blood bubbling at his lips. "You think you've won?" he rasped. "The pattern is already in motion. Others will follow. The Witchers will rise again, remade, perfected, and the world will burn for it." Geralt stared down at him. "If that's perfection, I'll take imperfection any day." The mage laughed once, hoarse, broken, and went still. For a long moment no one spoke. Then 13 said quietly, "It's over." Geralt shook his head. No. It's begun." They left the ruins as dusk fell, the sky streaked red like blood across stone. The forest seemed quieter now, the oppressive magic fading with each step. Yet the silence carried no peace. At the edge of the ravine they paused. The bridge behind them had collapsed during the battle, leaving only a gaping void between the cliffs. No one would follow them tonight. Alyssa turned to Geralt. What now? He looked east toward the shadowed mountains. If Elric was working with others, they'll be in Cadwyn. The old laboratories from the Witcher schools still hold secrets. We'll need to find them before anyone else does. 13's gaze followed his. And me? Geralt studied him for a long moment. You'll come with us, if that's your choice. You've got strength. But you need to learn what to do with it. I don't want to be a weapon, 13 said. Then you'd best learn how to fight, Geralt replied. The creature nodded slowly, as though the truth of it settled somewhere deep. They set camp that night beneath the eaves of the forest. The moon broke through the clouds, silver light glinting off Geralt's sword as he cleaned it. Alyssa dozed nearby and 13 sat staring into the fire. Was he right? The creature asked suddenly. About the Witchers dying out? Geralt paused. Maybe, but there's worse things to lose. Like what? Geralt looked into the flames. The reason we draw steel in the first place. The fire crackled softly. Somewhere beyond the trees, a wolf howled, a long, lonely sound. Geralt glanced toward the sound, his eyes reflecting the firelight like molten gold. The path stretched onward, dark and endless. Yet for the first time in many days, the Witcher felt not only burdened by it, but bound to something greater than his solitude. Morning would come, and with it the next step through the gloom. The next dawn bled pale and cold across the horizon. The storm had spent itself, leaving behind a washed sky and the smell of wet pine. The forest, once a shroud of menace, now glistened under a faint mist, dew clinging to every leaf. Geralt rose before the others, as he always did, his movements soundless and practiced. He stoked the coals of their dying fire, added a stick of resinous pine, and watched the smoke curl into the chill air. Roach grazed near the tree line, her breath steaming. Alyssa stirred from her cloak with a weary sigh, while 13 sat where he had been all night, unmoving, his eyes open and distant. He had not slept. Witchers needed little rest, but this one's sleeplessness came not from discipline. It came from fear of what he might dream. Geralt studied him quietly. You'll wear yourself thin, boy. Even Witchers need to let their minds rest. I'm not a Witcher, 13 said softly, without looking up. I'm what comes after. Geralt tossed another branch into the fire. Maybe. But what comes after still bleeds, still breaks, still needs to eat. You've a long road ahead before you can call yourself anything. Alyssa approached with 2 tin cups of broth. He's right, she said. You need to eat something before we move. We've a full day's ride to the foothills. 13 took the cup without protest. The warmth steadied his trembling hands. His golden eyes flicked from one face to the other. Do you think Elric was right? He asked suddenly. That Witchers need to be remade? Geralt's gaze remained fixed on the fire. Elric's kind always think the same way, that the world can be mended by force. Witchers were never meant to be perfect. We were meant to stand between the perfect monsters and the imperfect people. Alyssa's voice was quiet. "And yet how many of your kind remain?" Geralt looked up then, the faintest glint of sadness behind the steel of his eyes. "Few. Maybe too few. But numbers don't decide what's right." The morning passed in silence after that. When the sun climbed above the trees, they broke camp and headed north. The land rose in uneven slopes, the woods giving way to stony ridges and sparse grass. The trail wound toward the mountains of Cadwyn, cold country, harsh and gray, where the air itself seemed to smell of old secrets. By midday, the weather had turned again. A thin rain fell, carried by a wind, sharp enough to sting the skin. Geralt pulled his cloak tight and urged Roach onward. Alyssa rode behind, hood drawn low, while 13 followed on a borrowed horse, silent as ever. They crossed an old stone bridge spanning a deep gorge. The river below frothed white with meltwater, its roar filling the air. Halfway across, Geralt halted suddenly. His medallion had begun to tremble, not faintly, but in sharp, violent bursts. He dismounted, eyes narrowing. "Something's wrong." Alyssa raised her hand, murmuring a detection charm. The air shimmered, revealing faint traces of magic, threads of crimson light crisscrossing the bridge like spider silk. "A trap," she said. "Wards, carefully set." Geralt's expression hardened. "Elric's allies." No sooner had he spoken than the runes ignited. The air split with a deafening crack, and a surge of flame erupted from the bridge's far end. Figures appeared through the smoke. 3 of them, armored and cloaked, their faces hidden by masks of burnished steel. "Witcher," one of them called, his voice distorted by the helm. "By order of the Kedwini Circle, you are to surrender the creature in your company." Geralt's eyes flashed. "You'll have to take him." The lead mage gestured sharply. Fire roared forth again, streaming toward them like a living serpent. Geralt shouted to the others, "Down!" He cast Quen, the protective sign flaring golden, just as the flame struck. The blast staggered him, but did not break the shield. Alyssa answered with a counterspell, hard shaped into a lance of wind that tore through the mist, scattering embers and hurling one of the attackers back. 13's horse reared, screaming, and he leapt free. His eyes burned bright, his body trembling with the surge of something vast and unstable. "No!" Geralt shouted, seeing the glow rise beneath 13's skin. "Not again. Control it." But the creature's breath came ragged, his hands outstretched. The magic within him broke loose in a torrent of blinding light. The nearest mage screamed as his wards shattered, his body flung over the railing into the chasm below. The explosion rocked the bridge, stone cracked, splinters flying. Geralt grabbed Alyssa's arm, dragging her toward the opposite end. "Move!" 13 fell to his knees, the light fading, smoke curling from his fingertips. The last of the attackers advanced, chanting rapidly. Geralt turned and threw a silver dagger, catching the man through the wrist. The spell faltered. Alyssa finished it with a flash of blue fire that sent the mage collapsing in silence. When at last the echoes faded, only rain and the roar of the river remained. The bridge had half collapsed behind them, stones tumbling into the gorge below. Geralt knelt beside 13. "You nearly brought the whole mountain down." 13's voice was hoarse. "I couldn't stop it. It comes when I'm afraid." "You'll learn," Geralt said, "or it'll kill you first." They moved on, leaving the ruins of the bridge behind. Alyssa's hands shook as she cleaned the blood from her robes. "The Kedwini Circle knows we're coming," she said. "Elric wasn't working alone after all." "I never thought he was," Geralt replied. This was a test. They wanted to see what 13 could do. 13 looked at him, fear flickering in his eyes. Then they'll come again. Yes, Geralt said, and worse next time. By dusk, they reached a plateau overlooking the valley below. The mountains loomed ahead, peaks veiled in cloud. Nestled among them lay the ruins of a fortress, its towers broken, its gates fallen. Caer Taearn, once a keep of the School of the Viper. Geralt stared at it for a long moment. That's where they'll be. The Vipers were always fond of poison, both literal and otherwise. They camped in the shelter of a rocky outcrop. The night was bitter, the wind keen as a knife. Alyssa conjured a small fire that burned blue and smokeless. Geralt sat cleaning his sword again, the rhythmic motion calming his prayer. 13 huddled nearby, his face half lit by the flames. I remember something, 13 said suddenly. A name. He spoke it during the rituals, before the pain. Geralt looked up. Whose name? Elthas? The syllables came out strange, weighted. He said the circle's work began with Elthas. Alyssa frowned. Elthas the scholar? He disappeared decades ago. A Kedwini archmage, believed dead after the rebellion. Not dead, Geralt said, hiding. Probably the one who taught Elric. Silence fell again. The firelight flickered across their faces, painting them in gold and shadow. Finally, Alyssa spoke. If they truly mean to create a new breed of witchers, they'll need a source of mutagens. The last of those were lost when Kaer Morhen fell. Geralt's eyes narrowed. Unless someone found them. The Witcher gazed out toward the mountains where lightning flickered faintly in the clouds. Tomorrow we climb. The ruins hold answers, and maybe ghosts. 13 nodded slowly. If what waits there is the end of me, I won't run. Geralt sheathed his sword and stood. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Above them, the wind howled through the crags, carrying with it the scent of frost and distant death. The path wound upward into the gloom, and though none of them said it aloud, each knew that what waited in Caer Taearn would test not only their strength, but their souls. Geralt of Rivia stared into the darkness and saw the faint gleam of something vast and cruel stirring beyond the mountains. An old enemy reborn, not in flesh, but in man's endless hunger to master what should be left alone. The climb to Caer Taearn began before dawn. The mountain air was thin and sharp, the kind that burned the lungs and left frost on one's beard before the sun could rise. The old path was little more than a scar carved through stone, half buried by centuries of rock slides and neglect. Once, long ago, witchers of the Viper School had walked this way, their boots striking iron sparks on the same unforgiving ground. Now, only echoes remained. Geralt led the way, his senses stretched thin, every sound amplified by the stillness. Behind him came Alyssa, her breath forming pale ghosts in the cold air, and 13, silent, his gaze fixed on the peaks ahead. Clouds rolled low and heavy, veiling the world in shades of gray. By mid-morning, they reached a ledge overlooking the valley below. The ruins of the fortress stood before them, an enormous, crumbling citadel of black stone. Its walls were fractured, its towers toppled, yet a faint light pulsed from deep within, flickering like a heartbeat. Alyssa drew her cloak tighter. That light, do you feel it? Geralt's medallion vibrated against his chest. Magic, old and foul. They descended toward the gate. The once grand archway had half collapsed, but the sigil of the Viper was still visible above it. 2 serpents, coiled in endless pursuit, of each other's tails. Geralt brushed his fingers against the carving. "The School of the Viper," he murmured. "Assassins in Witcher's skin. They were the first to fall." "Looks like someone's tried to rebuild," Alyssa said, nodding to the newer timbers, bracing parts of the wall. "Or repurpose," Geralt replied. They passed into the courtyard. The air stank of rotten chemicals, a mix that turned the stomach. Crates and shattered bottles lay scattered across the stones, and strange symbols had been scrawled in chalk on every surface. Elven runes twisted into new, cruel forms. "This was a laboratory," Alyssa said softly. "Recently used." 13's eyes darted over the markings. "I know these," he said. "Elric drew them too. They focused the flow of power. He said they were gifts from his master." Geralt's jaw tightened. "Elthas." They crossed the courtyard, stepping over debris and half-frozen puddles of blood. Inside the keep, the corridors were lined with flickering torches that burned with unnatural blue flame. The walls seemed to hum faintly, alive with the pulse of the runes carved into them. Then they heard it, a voice echoing from deeper within, calm, measured, resonant with authority. "You've come far, Witcher. Farther than most." Geralt's hand went to his sword. "Elthas." The voice chuckled softly. "Ah, so the student's folly led you to the master. Elric was reckless but useful. Through him, I learned much of Kaer Morhen's lost secrets. Now I perfect them." Geralt motioned for the others to stay behind and advanced alone into the great hall. The chamber was vast, lit by hanging braziers that cast eerie shadows on the walls. At its center stood a dais of black marble carved with runes that pulsed like veins. Upon it, cloaked in gray, stood a man whose eyes glowed faintly beneath the hood. Elthas. He was not what Geralt had expected. No wild sorcerer drunk on his own power, but a figure of quiet composure. His hands were clasped before him, unarmed, though the air around him shimmered with restrained energy. "You look surprised," Elthas said. "Did you think me a madman? I have done what your kind never dared, refined the mutations, stripped away the chaos." Geralt's voice was low. "You turned men into monsters." Elthas smiled faintly. "Monsters, Witcher? I call them evolution. Look at the one behind you, 13. He is proof of my success. Flesh and magic, bound in harmony. The first of a new age." Geralt's eyes flicked toward 13, who had stepped into the light. "You call this harmony? He's dying because of you." "That is the price of progress," Elthas said coldly. "He is imperfect, but the next will not be. Not if I end you first." Elthas sighed. "You cannot end me, Witcher. You are a relic of the dying age. When the conjunction comes again, and it will, the world will need something greater than you to survive." Geralt's sword rasped free. "Maybe, but it doesn't need you." Elthas raised his hand, and the room erupted in chaos. The torches flared, the floor split, and shapes emerged from the shadows. Humanoid forms, their skin blackened, eyes burning with golden fire. The perfected brood. 13 gasped, stepping back as the creatures surrounded them. They moved with frightening precision, their movements faster than any humans. Geralt met the first with a clean strike, decapitating it in one motion, but another was already upon him. Alyssa shouted an incantation, fire blooming from her hands, but the heat only slowed them. "Focus on Elthas," Geralt shouted. "Cut the head and the body dies." He fought his way through the swarm, blades flashing silver arcs in the dim light. Blood, dark and smoking, splattered the stones. Alyssa cast again, her magic surging like a storm, hurling 2 of the creatures into the walls, where they burst apart. 13 stood trembling, the glow under his skin pulsing violently. He felt Elthas's gaze on him, a pull, irresistible, commanding. "Come, child," the mage called. "You were made for me. For this!" 13 screamed, his body arching as power surged through him. The other creatures halted, their attention turning toward him, their eyes flickering in time with the light that now poured from his veins. Geralt froze. "He's controlling them." Elthas laughed, triumphant. "He is the key, my link to the source itself." But 13's voice broke through the noise, a raw, agonized cry. "No!" The power burst outward, white-hot and wild. The walls shook. The creatures disintegrated in a wave of light, and Elthas staggered, shielding his face. Geralt lunged, driving his silver blade through the mage's chest. Elthas gasped, disbelief twisting his features. "Fool, you cannot stop it." The runes beneath them flared crimson, and the fortress began to tremble. The air shimmered with heat, the stone groaning under some vast, unseen pressure. Geralt pulled the sword free and dragged 13 back toward Alyssa. "Out!" he shouted. They ran. The halls cracked around them, pillars splitting, flames surging higher. The moment they burst through the gate, the mountain itself seemed to roar. A blinding flash erupted from the keep, followed by a deep, thunderous boom. The shockwave hurled them to the ground. When the light faded, Caer Taearn was gone. Only a blackened scar remained where it had stood. Geralt pushed himself up, wincing. "Everyone alive?" Alyssa coughed, her hair singed, but her eyes steady. "Barely." 13 sat motionless, staring at the smoking ruin. His skin no longer glowed, his breath shallow. "He's gone," he said, "but the power, I can still feel it. It's inside me." Geralt looked toward the ashes. "Then we'd best make sure it stays there." He rose, the wind tugging at his cloak, carrying with it the scent of stone and fire. The path stretched before them once more, scarred, uncertain, yet waiting. "Come on," he said. "We've got work yet to do." And though the mountain lay silent behind them, its shadow followed, whispering of powers not destroyed, only sleeping, waiting for the next fool to wake them. The wind off the mountains carried the scent of ash and burnt stone. For 2 days they traveled down from Caer Taearn's ruined heights, through narrow passes where snow still clung in the shadows, and the rivers ran black with silt. No birds sang there. Even the wolves had fled. The echoes of what had happened above still lingered in the air, an aftertaste of raw magic that made Geralt's medallion quiver whenever the breeze shifted. They reached the lower valleys. By dusk of the second day, the forest returned here dark and wet, the kind that never fully thawed, even in spring. Pines rose like pillars, their boughs heavy with mist. The path ahead wound toward the borderlands of Cadwyn, where the old roads split, one east toward Redania, the other south toward the Pontar crossings. Geralt steered them south, away from prying eyes. 13 said little. He rode slumped in the saddle, pale as frost, his eyes hollow. The glow beneath his skin had faded almost entirely, though faint lines of light still pulsed at his temples like veins of trapped lightning. Every so often he shuddered, as if some unseen force still clawed at him from within. Alyssa rode beside him, watching with quiet worry. "He's weakening again," she murmured to Geralt. "Each mile drains him further. The power inside him isn't stable. It's eating what's left of him." Geralt didn't answer. His gaze was fixed ahead, scanning the forest for danger. "There's a town half a day south, Flotsam. We'll rest there, find a place to regroup." Alyssa frowned. You think they'll welcome a witcher and... This? Geralt gave a dry snort. No, but they'll take our coin. By the time they reached the first lights of the town, night had fallen. Flotsam crouched on the edge of the Pontar like a wounded beast. Half-ruined palisades, crooked streets, and the smell of river tar. Smoke rose from the sawmills, mingling with the mists. They entered quietly, avoiding the main square. Even so, heads turned. Witchers were rare enough. The pale figure that followed him drew longer stares still. Whispers followed them. Mutant, mage's pet, curse-born. Geralt ignored them, leading his companions to a small tavern by the docks, where the sign creaked on its hinges. Inside, warmth and noise swallowed them. The fire burned low, and the patrons were too drunk or too weary to care who had entered. The innkeeper, a narrow man with a scarred lip, glanced up but asked no questions. Geralt dropped a pouch of coins on the counter. 2 rooms. Hot stew if there's any. Down to fish and barley, the man said, but it's hot? It'll do. They ate in silence. Alyssa sipped her broth, eyes distant. 13 didn't touch his bowl. He sat staring at the flames, as though the movement of the fire mirrored something deep within him. After a while, Geralt leaned closer. Talk to me. What's happening inside you? 13's voice was flat, hollow. It's like something's still alive in there. Aelthus called it the source. When he died, I thought it would fade, but it's growing stronger. Geralt frowned. You think he passed his power into you? I don't know, 13 said softly, but sometimes I hear him in my head, whispering. Alyssa looked up sharply. You should have said something sooner. I didn't want you to be afraid of me, 13 said. Geralt's gaze was hard. Fear won't help anyone now. Tomorrow we find a mage who can sense what's inside you. If it's Aelthus's essence, we may still be able to sever it. That night, Geralt took the first watch. The river fog drifted through the cracks in the window, carrying the smell of cold water and decay. Outside, a storm brewed over the Pontar, lightning flashing in the distance. Somewhere below, a dog barked once, then fell silent. When Alyssa relieved him at dawn, the Witcher had not moved from the window. He looked out over the mist-shrouded town, his face unreadable. There's trouble coming, he said quietly. I can feel it. He was right. By the time the sun climbed above the river, the town was already awake with tension. A group of Cadwini soldiers had arrived from the north, their armor dented and unkempt, their faces drawn. They spread through the streets like crows through a carcass, demanding information, searching houses. Witchers, one man muttered as they passed. Always they bring death with them. Geralt ignored it. He had more pressing concerns. 13 had not come down from his room. When Geralt went to check on him, he found the door unlatched, the bed empty, the window open. Damn it, he growled. They found him near the docks, standing at the edge of the water. His reflection shimmered on the surface, faintly golden. 13, Alyssa called. He turned, his eyes burning once more with that unnatural light. He's awake, he said simply. Geralt's hand went to his sword. Who? The source. 13's voice trembled. It's not just power, it's something alive, something trying to come through. The air shifted, the river stilled, and then the fog itself began to move, rolling, coiling, thickening into a shape that blotted out the sun. A voice whispered through it, deep and distant, older than language. Child of my making, open the gate. 13 fell to his knees, clutching his head. I can't stop it. Alyssa cast a barrier spell. the air flashing blue around them. "Geralt, it's using him as a conduit." Geralt drew silver. "Then we break the link." He moved, swift as instinct, but before he could strike, the fog coalesced into a figure, a towering silhouette of shadow and fire, eyes like molten gold. The dock shuddered beneath its weight. "You would defy creation, Witcher?" the voice thundered. "You, who are as much experiment as he?" Geralt raised his sword. "I kill what threatens the living. That's all that matters." The being laughed, a sound that cracked the air. "Then try." The battle was like none Geralt had fought. Each strike of his blade tore through smoke and fire, yet the creature reformed, laughing. Alyssa's spells blazed bright but were swallowed by the shadow. The air reeked of ozone and burning pitch. 13, Geralt shouted. "Fight it, don't let it use you." The creature faltered, its form wavering. For an instant, 13's face appeared within the flames, twisted with agony. "I can't hold it." "You can," Geralt snarled. "You're no one's weapon. End it." 13 screamed, a raw human sound, and light exploded outward, blinding white. The creature's roar turned to silence. The dock splintered, the river itself shuddered. Then all was still. When the light faded, 13 lay on the ground, his chest rising shallowly. The glow beneath his skin was gone. Alyssa knelt beside him, pressing her hands to his heart. "He's alive," she whispered. "Barely." Geralt looked toward the river. The fog had lifted. The sun broke through at last, pale but pure. He sheathed his sword slowly. "Let's get him away from here. There'll be more after this." They left Flotsam before noon, avoiding the patrols that gathered near the river's edge. Behind them, the townsfolk whispered of the morning's light and the monster that vanished into the water. As they rode south, the wind carried the smell of rain again. Alyssa glanced back once, watching the river fade into distance. "Do you think it's truly over?" Geralt shook his head. "Nothing that old dies easy." He looked down at 13, slumped against his saddle but breathing. "But for now he's won his fight. That's enough." The road ahead bent toward the horizon where dark clouds gathered once more. The Witcher urged Roach forward, his eyes fixed on the growing storm. There would be no rest yet, not while shadows lingered in the hearts of men and the ghosts of old magic still whispered beneath the earth. The path waited as it always had, and Geralt of Rivia rode on through the gloom. The storm broke before they reached the Temerian border. Black clouds rolled low across the sky, heavy with rain, and thunder cracked over the forest like the rumble of a distant siege. The rain came in sheets, cold and relentless, drenching the land until rivers overflowed their banks and the roads turned to gray mire. Geralt guided Roach along a narrow hunting track beneath the trees, head bowed against the wind. 13 rode between him and Alyssa, wrapped in a cloak that hung too loose on his thin frame. He had not spoken since the battle at the docks. The last of the golden light had faded from beneath his skin, but the mark it left was deeper than sight could measure. The boy, if he could still be called that, looked hollowed out like a vessel drained of meaning. "Keep him warm," Geralt said over the storm. "He's fading again." Alyssa rode close, cast in a small ward of heat that glimmered briefly before the rain swallowed it. "If we stop now, he won't last the night," she said. "But if we ride on in this weather, none of us will." Geralt considered this, scanning the forest. "There's an old hunter's lodge near the river. Half a mile north, we'll reach it before dark." They pressed on through the storm, hooves sloshing through the mud, until the outline of the lodge appeared. a sagging structure half swallowed by vines and shadow. Geralt dismounted first, forcing open the door with his shoulder. The interior was cold, dust thick on every surface, but it would hold against the rain. They lit a fire in the stone hearth, and the room filled slowly with the scent of smoke and damp wood. Alyssa stripped off her soaked cloak and began laying out herbs and vials while Geralt carried 13 to a bench near the fire. The boy's skin was cold, his breath shallow. "You should have left me," he whispered, eyes barely open. Geralt crouched beside him. "I've left too many already." "You don't understand," 13 said weakly. "When I closed the gate, something came through. Not the source, something else. It's inside me now." Geralt met Alyssa's eyes. She shook her head in silent disbelief. "He can't survive another possession," she said. "The strain alone." "Then we find a way to drive it out," Geralt said flatly. Alyssa bit her lip. "That's not simple magic. Whatever crossed over, it's anchored to his soul. Severing it might kill him." Geralt stood, pacing before the fire. "If we do nothing, it will kill him anyway." Thunder rumbled outside. The fire sputtered as wind pushed through the cracks in the walls. For a while, the only sound was the rain hammering the roof. Then 13 began to whisper, not in any language they knew, something guttural and broken, older than the elder speech. His eyes rolled back and the glow returned faintly to his veins. The floorboards creaked beneath him. "Geralt," Alyssa breathed, "it's starting again." The Witcher drew his sword. "Get behind me." The air grew heavy, thick as syrup. The shadows along the walls seemed to stretch, reaching toward the light. The boy's voice deepened, twisted, until it was no longer his. "Witcher, you cannot kill what was before the world had form." Geralt's stance didn't falter. "I've killed plenty of things that thought that way." The figure on the bench rose, not 13 anymore, but a shape, wearing his skin. The firelight flickered across its face, revealing eyes that blazed like molten amber, burning with something ancient and merciless. Alyssa's voice shook as she whispered a binding spell, runes glowing across her hands. The creature turned to her, smiled faintly, and the spell collapsed into silence. "Your words are young," it said. "Mine made the first of them." Geralt stepped forward. "You're not welcome in this world." "You have no world," the being answered, its voice layered with echoes. "You walk in the ruins of creation. My kind will reclaim what was lost. Not through him." Geralt struck. The blade met flesh, but instead of blood, light spilled from the wound. The creature staggered but did not fall. It reached out, gripping the blade, and for an instant Geralt felt its thoughts, vast, cold, endless. It was not a demon, not a spirit. It was something older, a memory of chaos itself, wearing form for the first time in eons. The Witcher tore free, breathing hard. The fire guttered, throwing the room into near darkness. Alyssa seized a flask from her satchel, a Witcher's elixir, thick with dimeridium, and hurled it at the creature. The vial shattered and the silver dust burned where it touched. The being screamed, a sound like tearing stone, and for a moment its hold faltered. "Now, Geralt," she cried. He moved faster than thought. The silver sword flashed in the dim light, tracing a sign of Írden across the air. The runes blazed bright, forming a circle that pulsed with blue flame. The creature recoiled, trapped within. 13's voice broke through, faint and desperate. "Kill me. Before it..." "No," Geralt said, forcing the blade toward the boy's chest. You fight it, you hear me? You're stronger than it. The creature writhed, its form splitting between light and shadow. The lodge shuddered as if struck by an earthquake, walls cracking, rafters trembling. Then, with a blinding flash, it shattered, vanished like smoke on the wind. 13 collapsed, limp in Geralt's arms. The Witcher knelt, checking for breath. A faint heartbeat answered. Alyssa slumped to the floor, her face pale. Did we? For now, Geralt said, but it's not gone. I felt it retreat, not die. He lifted 13 onto the bench again and covered him with his cloak. The boy's skin was clammy, his breathing shallow but steady. Outside, the rain began to ease, turning to a steady drizzle. Hours passed before anyone spoke again. Geralt sat before the dying fire, staring into the coals. That thing we faced, it wasn't meant for this world, but Elric and Aelthus opened a door, and now the wind's still blowing through it. Alyssa rubbed her temples. If that's true, there may be others like him, others bound to the same power. There will be, Geralt said quietly, and we'll have to find them before the mages do. He looked down at 13, whose sleep had deepened into stillness. He's the key, whether he wants to be or not. Outside, the storm at last began to die. The moon broke through the clouds, pale and cold, spilling light through the cracked roof. Geralt rose and stepped into the doorway, gazing out at the forest. Mist drifted over the river beyond, silver and ghostly in the night. For a long while he stood there, silent. Then softly he spoke the words that had guided him through countless nights and countless hunts. Evil is evil. Lesser, greater, middling, it's all the same. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword. But sometimes the only thing that stands between it and the world is a blade willing to cut. Behind him, Alyssa tended the fire, and 13 stirred, caught between dream and waking. The night held its breath, and though dawn would soon return, the path ahead felt darker than ever, stretching onward through rain and shadow, through the endless gloom where monsters, both old and new, waited to rise again. Morning crept across the forest like a thief, pale and uncertain. Mist curled between the trees, softening the scars left by the storm. The lodge still stood, though barely. Half its roof had caved in, and the air smelled of ash and damp timber. Geralt had not slept. He sat near the doorway, his sword laid across his knees, eyes fixed on the horizon where light began to bleed into the clouds. 13 slept beside the hearth, though his rest was uneasy. Every few breaths, he muttered something in that strange, ancient tongue. The sound made the Witcher's medallion quiver faintly, even in sleep. Alyssa stirred from her corner, rubbing the chill from her arms. "You've been awake all night," she said quietly. Geralt gave no answer. His gaze never left the trees. "Something's out there, watching." She frowned. "I feel it too. A residue of what happened. The air's wrong." "It's not just residue," Geralt said. "Whatever we drove out of him, it didn't die. It left a mark on this place, maybe even a path." She drew closer to the fire, feeding it with a few splinters of dry wood. "Then we should move before it finds its way back." The Witcher rose, rolling his shoulders to ease the stiffness. "We'll head south. The Pontar crossings are close, and once we're in Temeria, I can send word to Triss. She might know how to deal with what's inside him." Alyssa nodded, though doubt clouded her expression. "If it truly is something from before the conjunction, I don't think any mage alive can unbind it." Geralt's eyes darkened. Then we'll find another way. They left the lodge behind before the sun cleared the tree line. The forest stretched endless around them, green and gray, dripping with dew. Birds had returned, cautious, their songs fragile as glass. Yet beneath the natural sounds lay something else, a low hum, faint but constant, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Geralt heard it clearly now, so did 13. He rode with his head lowered, eyes distant, as if listening to a voice only he could hear. "Talk to me," Geralt said. "What's it saying?" 13 hesitated. "It's not words. It's direction, like the pull of a tide. South, always south." Alyssa glanced at the Witcher. "Could be a lure. The creature wants him back under its control." "Maybe," Geralt said. "Or maybe it's warning us where it's going." By midday they reached a broad river fork where the water ran fast and green. A small ferry waited on the bank, tied to a post. No ferryman in sight. Geralt dismounted, checking the moorings. The line was fresh, the knots tight. Someone had been here recently. He turned to the others. "We cross quickly. I don't like open ground." They guided the horses onto the raft and pushed off. The current caught at once, tugging them downstream. For a time only the sound of rushing water filled the air. Then 13 stiffened. His hand shot to his temple. "It's closer," he said through clenched teeth. Geralt followed his gaze. Downstream the fog thickened into a wall, swirling against the current. Shapes moved within it, tall, indistinct, gliding just above the surface of the water. "Brace," the Witcher said. The fog broke around them, and the shapes came clear. Figures of smoke and bone, their faces featureless, their hands ending in long, curved blades. Wraiths, but not of any kind Geralt had seen before. Their light was golden, not white. He drew steel, the blade flashing in the mist. "Keep him safe," he told Alyssa, then leapt to meet the first. The sword cut through the creature's chest, scattering smoke and sparks, but the form reformed instantly. It struck back, its blade hissing through the air. Geralt ducked low, slashed upward, and drove a Yrden sign into the deck. The rune flared, freezing the nearest wraiths in place. "Alyssa!" he shouted. She answered with a burst of igni, the fire roaring from her hands in a cone of blue heat. The trapped wraiths burned like paper, their screams lost to the river's roar. But more were coming, dozens now pouring from the fog. The ferry lurched, struck by an unseen force. Alyssa fell, barely catching the railing. 13 moved before Geralt could stop him. He stood at the raft's center, eyes blazing gold once more. "No!" Geralt growled. "Not again." But the power within the boy erupted like a storm. The river exploded outward, water rising in spirals of light. The wraiths shrieked, dissolving into mist. For an instant the world turned blinding white, then silence. When the light faded, the fog was gone. The ferry drifted half-broken toward the far shore. Alyssa coughed, clutching the side. What did he do? Geralt knelt beside 13, who lay motionless, his chest rising faintly. He unleashed it again, controlled it this time, but barely. Alyssa looked at the empty water. Those wraiths, they were drawn to him like moths to a flame. Not drawn, Geralt said grimly. Summoned. The thing inside him called them here. They reached the opposite bank and dragged the raft onto the mud. The sun hung low now, a dull red disk behind the clouds. Geralt stood, scanning the tree line. We make for the hills. If we keep to the ridges, we'll lose whatever's tracking us. As they climbed, 13 regained consciousness. His voice was faint but clear. I saw it this time, in the fog. Geralt looked back. What did you see? The source. The world before this one. It's not dead. It's waiting. It wants to come through me. Alyssa stopped in her tracks. If that's true, then killing Elthas didn't end his work. It only gave it a vessel. Geralt's jaw clenched. Then we'll have to find where the door opens and close it for good. They reached the ridge as night fell. Below stretched an expanse of dark forest and marshland, silver under the moon. To the east, a faint glow marked a settlement. Temerian outpost fires, maybe. We rest here, Geralt said. Tomorrow we find Triss, or someone who can reach her. If anyone can make sense of this, it's her. They built a small fire sheltered by rock. The night was cold, but clear. The stars bright between breaks in the cloud. For a while, none spoke. The silence between them was not fear now, but the weight of understanding. At last, Alyssa broke it. You faced many things, Geralt. Beasts, curses, monsters out of nightmare. Have you ever faced something like this? The Witcher stared into the fire. No. Monsters are simple. They kill because they must. This thing, it wants more than blood. It wants to change what we are. And if it can't be stopped, then we stop everything it touches. The wind sighed through the pines. 13 stirred in his sleep, murmuring again in that ancient language. Geralt glanced toward him, hand resting on the hilt of his sword, not in threat, but in weary readiness. Above them, the clouds parted. The moonlight fell on the boy's face, pale and still. For the first time in days, his expression was peaceful. Alyssa wrapped her cloak tighter. You think he'll live through this? Geralt didn't answer for a long time. When he did, his voice was quiet. He'll live, I'll see to that. But peace, that's harder to promise. The fire burned low. Beyond the ridge, lightning flickered again, silent and distant, over lands not yet touched by the storm. Geralt of Rivia sat and watched the sky, his thoughts as heavy as the clouds above. In the faint glow of the embers, the medallion on his chest stirred once more, not from danger near, but from something vast and unseen awakening far away. The path stretched on, winding toward whatever waited in the south. And though the night was calm for now, the Witcher knew that calm was only the pause before the next shadow fell across the world.